Wow, just like that, huh? Are we ready? Okay, let's do it. My name is Wally, I'm an alcoholic. Hi, everybody. And by the grace of God and this simple program, I've not found it necessary to take a drink since October 30th of 1988, and for that I'm truly grateful. One day at a time. I want to start by thanking the Tristate Roundup host committee for the opportunity to share with you tonight part of my story. What an awesome committee, what an awesome event this is. As soon as I walked in the room, it's like Yogi Berra said, deja vu all over again. I've been in this room several times before, but this is the first time I've actually seen this room from this position, and what an honor, and I just feel truly, truly blessed. I've had a chance to get reconnected with many old friends already, and I've had a chance to already meet new friends, and I look forward to meeting more new friends during the course of this weekend. I am just so blessed. Again, the host committee was able to take into account some of my health issues. Thank you again for making it possible for me to join you tonight. I am just, I've experienced so many miracles, I don't even know where to begin. And I've met so many angels on the ground, I don't know where to begin. But let me go ahead and just pick a spot to start, and we'll just let it go from there. At 1 year of sobriety, my sponsor sat me down, and he said, "Wally, I'm not going to be alive much longer. But if you remember these two things, you may not find it necessary to take a drink for the rest of your life, whether I'm here or not." And he does pass away 8 weeks later. Somehow he must have known it was coming. None of us did. We lost him quite suddenly. But that conversation has emblazoned in my memory banks. Number one, if you don't remember your last drink, you haven't taken it. And number two, if you don't know where we came from, you'll never know what a miracle this program truly is. And I want to use that as kind of the guidelines for telling my story. What Phil was trying to impress upon me wasn't that we need to somehow conjure up the last day. Some of us don't even remember the last week. Some of us don't remember the last month. But what Phil wanted to impress upon me was, do not ever forget how bad it was before you got here. The big book makes it very, very clear. On page 24, it says our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are great at forgetting just how bad it was. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey back there. I try to stay away from drunkalogs. I am a AA archivist historian. They didn't do drunkalogs in the early days, and I know that we all have one, but I want to concentrate on is my recovery story and the miracles that I've seen along the way, and those angels on the ground that have guided me ever since I walked into these rooms. And actually the angels that were guiding me long before I found these rooms, now that I look back upon it. In 1968, I'm doing a tour of duty in Vietnam. I did 2 tours, and I'm an MP, and I'm in a village with a South Vietnamese sergeant, and this NVA comes out of the crowd, and We're in a marketplace, and he has a gun, and he puts it in the chest of the South Vietnamese sergeant and pulls the trigger, and I watch him fall dead right at my feet. Then he puts the gun in my chest. I look at him, he looks at me, and he doesn't pull the trigger. Goes back into the crowd. Some Army guys saw what happened. They came over, and they sent out people. They never found him, but these Army guys said, "My God, man, we just witnessed a miracle. You are truly blessed." And I said, "Blessed hell, I am cursed. I wanted him to pull the trigger. I wanted it to be over." I was already a full-blown alcoholic, and I knew it. I wasn't ready to admit it, but I knew that alcohol, even then, had me beat. I do have a drug story. I do not tell it at the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. I believe in our singleness of purpose, but you can kind of see between the lines on some of this too. I came back from Vietnam, and I spent the next 20 years in the darkness. I was afraid of people. I was terrified of people as a result of what happened in that marketplace. I did a lot of geographics. Actually, I'm a Woodstock survivor. 2 weeks, yes, 2 weeks back from Vietnam. I'm at Woodstock, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and I'm saying, my God, we lost the war in Vietnam, but while I was away, you guys won the war here in the United States. But I was on my way to Mexico because I could not assimilate. Spent another 6-8 months in the jungle. That was my transition back into the mainstream, sort of. And that was living in the jungle without people shooting at me. I emigrated back across the border into Hollywood, California, and that's where I spent the next 3 years as a street junkie. And it just didn't get any better. It just got worse and worse. Took a lot of geographics. I'm in Seattle, Washington in 1976, and the cops pulled me over, and they arrested me for DUI, and they didn't send me to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm not sure if they did, it would have made any difference, because I was still in such denial that this was my problem. Alcohol was my solution to all of the horror that I'd witnessed in those few years that I was in country. They sent me to Alcohol Awareness School, and I'm sitting there in class. My license is gone, and my soon-to-be ex-wife is driving me to these classes, and the instructor stands up and says, "Of the 20 of you that are in this room tonight, we have been doing this long enough to know statistically that somewhere between 14 and 16 of you are alcoholics." And I'm looking around the room. Oh my God, isn't it bad enough they took my license away, but now they're forcing me to sit in a room full of alcoholics? I wonder who they are. We found a bar across the street, and we started talking about who were the alcoholics in this class. At the end of the session, there was something like 14 or 16 of us sitting in the bar trying to figure out who the alcoholics were. Took another couple geographics. Ended up in Tucson, Arizona. My parents had moved to this little cowboy town up in the mountains outside of Tucson called Patagonia. And yes, there is a Patagonia, Arizona. It's surrounded by national forest. There's only enough water and only enough space for about 700 people. 700 people 50 years ago, 700 people today. My parents had moved there in the 70s. I caught up with them in the 80s. And so I'm drinking my way to Patagonia yet one more time on a Friday night. And of course, by the time I get to Patagonia, I'm pretty well inebriated, and I staggered into the Big Steer bar, and there's a new bartender. And I go over to her, and I introduce myself. My name is Wally, and I live in Tucson, but I'm here on a regular basis, and I haven't seen you here before. And she said, well, my name is Sandra, and I'm just filling in for the summer. I also live in Tucson. I'm a student at Pima College. And the shyness kicked in. I couldn't think of anything else to say, and then I looked right at her, and I said, isn't that interesting, that piece of jewelry you're wearing? What's that circle and triangle all about that you're wearing as a pendant? And she said, well, it's a symbol for Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a recovering alcoholic. And I said, isn't that amazing? I have never met an alcoholic before in my life. I'd never met anyone who ever admitted they were an alcoholic. And that's true. And she said, well, I am an alcoholic. What would you like to drink? So there I am, sitting on my bar stool, slamming down a Diet Coke because I don't want her to think that I am an alcoholic. But Sandra turned out to be my first angel on the ground in terms of recovery, because I went back to the bar the next night before I started drinking, and we talked for a while, and we were both single at the time, and she said, yes, I'll give you my phone number, and yes, I'll allow you to take me out to dinner some night that I'm not working, in exchange for me escorting you to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't honestly say that I was 13th stepped into AA. I'd like to conjure up that image, but it's not true. She was 2.5 years sober. She knew the deal, and she knew her only job was to get me to a meeting. I did take her out to dinner about 3-4 weeks later on a Sunday night. It was a terrible evening. I was hungover, and it didn't go well. I met her in July, and it's now October, and I'm still stalling about this meeting. And she calls and she says, we're going to the meeting next Friday night, and that's all there is to it. So what do? I start drinking my way to Patagonia once again. And I showed up at my parents' home on a Friday night, and Saturday morning, I'm standing in their combination grain room and chicken coop, throwing down some warm beers before breakfast. Just me and the chickens. And I'm looking down at the chickens, and the chickens are looking up at me, and I'm looking down at the chickens, and the chickens are looking up at me, and I'm sure they probably said something like, bark, 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 bark. That's what chickens do, right? But what I heard one of those chickens say, I guess that chicken's another one of my angel on the grounds too. I heard the chicken say, Wally, this is not social drinking. And I got it for the first time ever. There is really something wrong with this picture. And that was my last drink. And I don't ever, ever want to forget how bad it was before I got here. Not ever. Because it was a long, long 20-year run to find you. But I didn't come willingly. I knew I had to go to this meeting the following Friday night, so I did stop drinking. I had to call in sick at work. I shook it out at home, sick as a dog. And about Wednesday, Sandra called and said, okay, you ready to go to that meeting? I said, well, yes, Sandra, I am ready to go, but I can't go to a meeting in Tucson, Arizona. And she said, well, why not? What if somebody sees me there? They might think I'm an alcoholic. And she said, well, they're open meetings, anybody can go. And I said, I don't know about meetings or any of the falderall, but I'm not going to a meeting in Tucson. Okay, let's go to Phoenix. Oh no, I used to live in Phoenix. At the time, 2.4 million people. What if somebody sees me there? They might think I'm an alcoholic. Okay, Wally, where are we going to this meeting? Well, I picked her up Friday at noon, and we drove 5.5 hours to Sedona, Arizona. The meeting was on Stutz Bearcat, so that I could go to a meeting where I would not be recognized. What a sick puppy, huh? And she put up with it. 5.5 hours up, 5.5 hours back. But as we're getting ready to walk into this meeting, and it's down in a basement, and there aren't a lot of basements in Arizona, I do remember that very well. I panicked. I turned to her and I said, I can't go into this meeting unless you tell me what's going to happen. And she said, well, nothing's going to happen because you're going to just sit down and keep your mouth shut. Well, I can do that. Except I'd never been to a meeting before. And we all sat down, and somebody read some things, and they gave out some chips, and somebody said something, is there anybody here who was less than 30 days or attending their first meeting? Please raise your hand. I raised my hand. Yes? Oh, I'm Wally, and this is my first AA meeting. And little did I know that that was a signal for this home group. And thank God they did. They changed the format. And they didn't call it a first step meeting, they called it turning points. The turning points that had brought each and every one of them into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I heard my story again and again and again and again. I wasn't ready to capitulate, but I thought it was interesting to hear my story in other people's words. Two weeks later, Sandra says, calls me and says, I'd like to take you to another meeting. I said, I've been to my meeting. I'm done. She said, no, this is different. This is a speaker meeting. I don't know what's going down there. And she said, well, I'm going to come over and I'm going to bring you a book. And she did bring me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And she said, the person that's going to speak on Saturday night, his story's in this book, and I want you to read his story. At that time, third edition, it was Dr. Alcoholic Addict, and it was Dr. Paul. And I said, okay, I'll read this story. I did read the story. I thought it was interesting. A man with credentials, a medical doctor, a pharmacist that did have a problem with alcohol. And then Saturday we go down to this meeting, which was at the Tucson Convention Center. As soon as I looked in, there was 1,000 people in the room. And I just turned to Sandra and I said, I can't go in there. Look at all the chairs are taken. And she said, watch this. And she grabs me by the arm and she drags me down and puts me on the floor in front of the first row. So here I am staring up at the podium. Max, Dr. Paul's wife, spoke first. She was the Al-Anon speaker. Then they took a break and people went out and did what they did. Then Dr. Paul got to the podium and he said he only did this for a short period of time. I didn't get to know him fairly well after this. But he said he only did this for a short period of time, but after he identified and before he actually got into telling his story, he'd say, "Oh, wait a minute, I need to make sure I'm in the right room. Will all the alcoholics please raise your hand?" 800 hands go up, and I'm looking around the room. Now I'm looking. Oh my God. How about all the Al-Anons? Woo, another 200 hands go up. And I'm looking around and say, "Isn't that amazing? I'm the only person in this room that's not an alcoholic." Or married to one. And Dr. Paul looked right down at me and said, "And for those of you who didn't raise your hand, welcome, you're my kind of an alcoholic." He spent the whole hour talking about denial. The whole hour. So Dr. Paul, another one of the angels on the ground, and these are miraculous coincidences. I call them divine appointments. To meet Dr. Paul in my second meeting, and to have a lady that put up with a 5.5-hour drive to Sedona, Arizona for my first meeting. But I'm done. But what I learned subsequently is that an alcoholic without alcohol and an alcoholic without a program is in trouble. And in 60 days, I hit the wall. Bang. Went stark, raving mad. Started having hallucinations, double vision, started calling in sick, didn't even realize I missed Christmas. I mean, it was really a sad state of affairs for about a week. And then I did the only thing I knew to do, and that was to pick up the phone and call the phone number for Alcoholics Anonymous in the book. I called the Tucson intergroup office. It was 2 days after Christmas, and a man answered the phone, and I said, "Your name is John, right?" And he said, "Yeah, my name's John." And I said, "I'm not an alcoholic, but I'm having all these symptoms of somebody that's been on a bender for a couple weeks." Now, how does a non-alcoholic know about being on a bender for 2 weeks? And he said, "That's interesting, Wally. Normally we'd send 2 people out to see you, but it's 2 days after Christmas. We don't have the staff that we normally have. Do you think you could drive down to the office?" And so I did. I got in the car and I drove down to the office. And we spent a couple hours talking, and then it got to be about 5:30 in the evening, and he said, "Well, we're getting ready to close the office down. I'd like for you to summarize for me one more time all the reasons that you're not an alcoholic." And I said, "Well, John, I haven't had a drink for 60 days. Doesn't that prove I'm not an alcoholic?" And he said, "Oh, I've known people that haven't had a drink for years, but they're still alcoholics. Do you think you could stop drinking for a year?" And I said, "Hell no, why would I want to?" At least I was being honest with him. He said, "How about 90 days? Does that prove I'm not an alcoholic?" He said, "No, but okay, I'll think about it." "Why else?" "Well, I'm a middle manager of a Fortune 500 company. I mean, that's my brand new car out there in the parking lot. It was a company car, and they were coming to take it away because I was being fired from another Fortune 500 company. I have a beautiful home in the southwest side of Tucson. I rent, I don't own." He said, "Where do you live?" And I said, okay. I volunteered the address, and he said, "Isn't that amazing? I'm your neighbor 2 doors down." And I'm going, "Geez, I thought it was a good neighborhood. I got an alcoholic 2 doors down." Like I said, I did not come willingly. He said, why else aren't you an alcoholic?" I said, "John, I have a bachelor's degree, I have a master's degree. I couldn't have done that if I was an alcoholic." He said, "Wally, I don't know about you, but this is my card. John P., PhD, Professor of Electrical Engineering, University of Arizona, He had one more degree than I did, and I'm done. I've run out of excuses. I've run out of places to run. He said, there's a meeting at 6 o'clock over at the Northwest Delano Club. I'd like for you to go there. If you're still this sick tomorrow, I'll give you a medical referral. I can't do that here. But since I'm your neighbor 2 doors down, I can talk to you about it when I'm not working here. So I go to that meeting, and I have no idea what happened there, but after the meeting, this guy comes up and he said, my name is Phil, and I'm your sponsor. Whoa, what does that mean? I'm going to take you through the 12 steps. Oh, those steps that are on the wall in the meeting hall. He said, yeah. I said, oh, okay. I didn't know any different. And I certainly didn't know that he knew the original program from the 1940s, where the sponsor chooses the newcomer, and the sponsor blasts the newcomer through the steps as quickly as possible. The mantra from the 40s, we take the steps quickly and often, and that was his MO, quickly and often. He told me a little bit of his story, and then he said, well, I need to ask a couple of questions. And I said, okay. He said, do you have one of these books? And I said, yes, I do. And he said, have you read it? I said, well, I read a story in the back. He said, well, no, that doesn't count. Have you read the text of the book? And I said, no, I haven't. And then he really insulted me. He said, can you read? Whoa. What do you mean, can I read? I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree. He said, no, it doesn't matter what kind of credentials you have. People, when they're new, have a hard time comprehending this book. So if you're having trouble comprehending this book, I will read the appropriate parts of the big book to you. There's only about 50 paragraphs that were used to take people through the steps in the early days. And so, first of all, he chose me. He was going to read the big book to me. And he's my sponsor. He's taking me through the steps. And he said, since you're such a good reader, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. And your homework assignment is to read page 25, and there's 2 paragraphs there I want you to read, and then tomorrow night I want you to tell me what you read. I said, okay, I'll do that. And he said, oh, but before we part company tonight, I need to ask you a question. Are you an alcoholic? And I said, no, I don't think I am, Phil. He said, is your life unmanageable? See, he knew the hooks. He gave me the first step hook on page 52. He said, I'm still going to take you through the steps. It doesn't matter whether you think you are or you aren't. But are you having trouble with personal relationships? Oh, yeah, just ask all these ex-wives. We couldn't control our emotional natures. Just ask those Fortune 500 companies that kept firing me. We were afraid of misery and depression. Just ask my psychiatrist. We couldn't make a living. Again, Fortune 500 company. Goodbye, Wally. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear and happy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. I answered yes to all of the above. He said, bingo. Your life is unmanageable. You've taken the first step. Now go home and read page 25, and tomorrow night tell me what you read. So I showed up the next night, and he said, okay, what'd you read? I said, fourth dimension. There's fourth dimension in there. He said, good, you got 2 words out of 2 paragraphs. See what I was trying to say? I said, oh no, there's another word there, God. You having trouble with that God word? Yes, I am, Phil. I am a 100% total non-believer. And then he gave me the second step hook. Page 46. Pretty straightforward. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, express even the willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for us to fully comprehend or define or comprehend that power. since you don't believe, are you willing to believe that I believe? And I said, yeah, Phil, I believe you believe. You told me part of your story last night. 20 years ago, you crawled out from under a bridge, and now you're president of an oil refinery. Boy, I couldn't figure that one out. To me, it looked like he'd still just crawled out from under the bridge. I mean, he was a wildcatter in Bakersfield, California. He had skin like leather. He'd been in a lot of bar fights. He was cut up pretty bad, a lot of scars. But he was president of an oil refinery. So I said, yeah, I'll take the second step based on your belief. And he said, and Wally, for the rest of the steps, for you, it's God as you don't understand him. So not only did he give me the second step hook, but he gave me something I could wrap my brain around. So third step prayer, and we did it right there in the parking lot. God, as I don't understand you, I offer myself to you to build with me and to do with me as you will. Took out the these and the thous. We did the third step prayer. And he said, now, since you're such a good reader, yeah, I'm 2 days into this. I want you to read from the bottom of page 63 to the end of the chapter. And tomorrow, tell me what you read. So I went home and I read and tried to figure it out. And next night he said, what'd you read? It's an inventory. He said, good. How's the inventory coming? It's done. He said, really? I said, yeah, it's a blank sheet of paper. Why so? Well, ever since I got to AA 3 days ago, I don't have a resentment in the world. He said, well, you got one now. Put my name at the top of the page. And we're doing a fifth step tomorrow. So I showed up at his house the next day with a blank sheet of paper with his name at the top. F-I-L. That was my entire four-step inventory. He looked at it. He said, that is a perfect fourth step. Again, in the early days, the sponsor does the writing anyway. You're just validating the fact that you're not capable of writing. So, yeah. So you talk, I write. And at the end, he circled a few things. He says, there's your 8-step amends list. And then we did 6 and 7 right there in the living room. And he said, okay, your parents are on the list. When are you going to make amends to your parents? I said, well, I'm going to go down to Patagonia this Saturday, and I'll make amends to them when I get there. And he said, well, normally I would go with you because, again, that was part of the original program. The sponsor does the writing. The sponsor accompanies the newcomer for the first couple amends, not to be there physically in the room, but to just drive the car, be waiting down the street, be waiting in the parking lot, be waiting in the waiting room, waiting at Denny's in Canada, Timmy Hortons, wherever it might be, but the sponsor's there. Because what if it goes badly? And I start to break and run. Where am I running to? The Big Steer Bar. Immediately. No, we run into the sponsor. How'd it go? Terrible. I got thrown out of the house. Oh, let's go down to Denny's and talk about it. How'd it go? Oh, very well. We decided on a payment plan, $50 a month for the next 10 years. Good, let's go to Denny's and talk about it. But he said, I can't be there. When are you going to make the amends? And I said, well, I'll make the amends at 2 o'clock. He said, if I haven't heard from you by 2:45, I'm calling your parents. This is before cell phones and everything, so I gave him my parents' phone number, knowing that he was going to call at 2:45 if I hadn't pulled this off. So at 2:05, my mom's getting up and walking out of the room. It's over. She said, Red, I don't know what this, that's my nickname, my family nickname. I don't know what this cult is that you joined, this Alcoholics Anonymous, but you're not an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic, what is our family going to think? If you're an alcoholic, what are our friends going to think? I'm not even listening to this. And she gets up and walks out of the room. So I'm calling Phil about 2:10. Since he's president of an oil refinery, he's got a private line right to the corner office. We used to call it the bat phone. So I'm on the bat line, and he picks up. He says, hello? I said, Phil, it's Wally. He said, I'm in a meeting. I said, I know, Phil, but Mom just got up and walked out of the room. Stay right where you are. Do not move. I'm calling you back as soon as I can. So he called me at 2:45. He said, where are you going now? I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to drive back to Tucson. So he actually met me at Denny's in downtown Tucson, and we talked about it. So he was the first person I saw after the amends was made. Not only is Phil one of my angels on the ground by getting me through the steps in less than a week and saving my life in the process, but he also set into motion a series of events. My mother, 9 months later, walks into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at 67 years of age and stayed with us for the next 19 years as a result of what happened when I was in Patagonia trying to make my amends. Yes, she joined us. So Phil's got me doing a meditation in the morning and listening to the indwelling spirit that I don't believe in, and he's got me working with others. And I said immediately, Phil, what do you mean you want me to sponsor? You know, I'm like a week and a half into this, and I said I'm not ready. And he said, isn't it amazing? Just about everybody ever to walk into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous has said exactly the same thing that you've said. None of us are ever ready. It's just what we do. So he had me starting to work with others. Then I made a real big mistake because in our meeting, what I learned is that if you brought up the topic, they didn't ask you to speak. And since I'm deathly afraid of people, and I'm not sharing at these meetings, you know, my name's Wally, I'm an alcoholic, and I pass. That's the only thing that ever got out of me. I started becoming a topic maker-upper. I'd get together and I'd read something and, oh, yeah, let's see. Yeah, maybe I should bring up not being the hasty and foolish martyr who would needlessly sacrifice others to save himself from the alcoholic pit. Ooh, there's a good topic. Oh, another topic, and another topic. And then I brought up the topic, why isn't there an advanced textbook of Alcoholics Anonymous? I mean, I've read this thing twice. Where's the college course? Ooh, did I get crucified in that meeting? It did not go well. So I'm crawling out to my car after the meeting, and Phil catches up with me and he says, Wally, you're in trouble. I said, oh yeah, Phil, I know I'm in trouble. I'll never bring up another topic again. He said, no. It has nothing to do with the meeting. But I learned something tonight that I have to pass on to you. I said, what's that, Phil? You are not going to make it. Whoa. Now that was pretty harsh. That was like a little 2x4 between the temples. You are not going to make it. You are trying to intellectualize your way through recovery, and people that try to intellectualize their way through recovery don't make it. It's the language of the heart, and you don't have it there. You just don't have it. If you want me to continue to be your sponsor, I want you to take all those Hazelton guides, I want you to take all that other literature, I want you to put it on the shelf, and you're to only read this book until you have 1 year of sobriety. And that also saved my life. This was the only book I read till I had 1 year of sobriety. And he said, I've been reading the book for 20 years, and I've never gotten to page 164 without finding something new. And I said, well, I'm sure I can get to the end without finding something new. And he said, try it. So I went through the book, and I highlighted all the important parts, and I showed it to him. And he was pretty happy with that. And he said, okay, let's go home and try it again. So I went home. Oh, that wasn't there last time. Oh. Where'd that come from? It was the third time through the book that I realized what he was trying to impress upon me. The book doesn't change, but we do. And that's why I read this book every morning, and that's why I still have never found it necessary to go beyond the 164 pages in this book. I read a story from time to time, but I'm always finding something new. This is a magical book. This is one of the greatest spiritual books ever written, just for us. And I do find it revealing each and every time I crack the cover. 1 year of sobriety, Phil sits me down and says what I opened with. If you don't remember your last drink, you haven't taken it. But the second one was, if you don't know where we came from, you'll never know what a miracle this program truly is. Now, not only did I not know where we came from, I didn't care. I'm a scientist. I'm a chemist with a master's degree in statistics. I do black and white. I don't do gray. I don't do history. I don't do sociology. I don't do psychology. I don't do any of those gray areas of education. I just do black and white. I want the equations. I want the procedures. And Phil sends me off to learn about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went home and I took down off the shelf a book titled Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers. I wasn't reading the book. I just was looking at some pictures. And I took it down to my home group, and there's a picture of Dr. Bob's home, 855 Ardmore Avenue, Akron, Ohio. We do have a good friend of mine that's going to be speaking tomorrow night from the Akron area that's associated with that house that has been such a life changer for me. So I took the book down and I'm showing it around, and Phil sees me doing this, and he said, Wally, if you want to find out about Dr. Bob's house, find out for yourself. Don't bother these people. I'm sure he probably meant call Akron and find out if there was a Dr. Bob's house. I got an airplane and flew to Akron to find out if there was a Dr. Bob's house. I flew out of Tucson on a red-eye on November 15th, 1989, had that one-year medallion in my pocket, showed up in Akron about 10 o'clock in the morning. I did call the intergroup office, and thank God for intergroups. They saved my life when I was 60 days sober. They changed my life at 1 year of sobriety. A lady answered the phone and said, yes, there is a Dr. Bob's house. There wasn't until a couple years ago. Some members of the fellowship have actually purchased the house, and they're in the process of refurbishing it back to the way it was in the summer of 1935. And they only have one meeting a year in Dr. Bob's living room, and it's this afternoon, and you might want to attend. Yeah, wow. One meeting a year, and it's today. So I did my part. I rented the car. I drove where she told me to drive, which was right off the freeway, and it was the Arid Club, and she'd called ahead. There were two people waiting for me, and they escorted me across town to Dr. Bob's home, because she said, you'll never find the home on your own if you're not from this area. And she was right, Hill and Dale and hither and yon. I get to the house 5 minutes before the meeting started. They had taken all the furniture out of the living room. Again, keep in mind this is 1989. They don't do this anymore. The meeting's has gotten far too large to do this. But in 1989, there was about 60, 70 people there. And they put a table in the living room, and they put 8 chairs around the table, and it was a speaker meeting. And by the time I got there, the house was pretty full. It's a small house for any of you that haven't seen it. It's a relatively small house. I stood in the doorway for the next 2.5 hours, listening to 8 people. The only requirement to speak is you had to have 40 years of sobriety. 40. When I'm there on November 16th, 1989, The chairperson didn't have 40 years, so he couldn't speak. Don C. The other 8 had all been sponsored by Dr. Bob. They had all been taken through the steps in one day. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I got the slow version. These guys are going through in an afternoon, 2-3 hours. Whoa. They were sponsoring within a week. And they were still sober to tell me their stories. I had a conversion experience right there in that living room. I dedicated my life to studying the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've done that every day ever since. They took me into the kitchen. Sue Smith Windows, Dr. Bob's daughter, was serving coffee. We both were terrified of people. We both hid out in the kitchen for about an hour, got to know each other, and we became very close friends. Sue actually became very close friends with my mother. She loved hummingbirds, and we'd fly her into either Phoenix or Tucson and take her down to Patagonia so that she could spend a couple days just looking at hummingbirds with my mom and dad. It was 6 months later that I called the General Service Office in New York, and I'm talking to Frank M., who was our GSO archivist at the time, and I said, Frank, how do I become an archivist? I had a conversion experience in Dr. Bob's living room. I'm going to study the history of AA for the rest of my life. What can I do to get certified? And he said, well, that's easy, Wally. You go down to the office supply store and get some business cards made, put your name on it, and put archivist under it. And then you are one. I didn't know any different. I did. So I'm passing them around for... And then in 1992, I appointed the Arizona area archivist, and I did bring the Arizona area archives here to the Tristate Roundup a couple times during the 90s, and I've been back since. As I mentioned before, this room has a lot of fond memories to me. In 1999, Sue Smith Windows, we almost lost her, and she called when she got out of the hospital, and she said, Wally, of the 2 million people in Alcoholics Anonymous, you're the only person I trust to find a home for Mom and Dad's stuff. And I said, what stuff? The stuff that's been up in the attic since 1950, when my dad died, and I want you to catalog it, and I want you to find a home for it. And I honored her wishes, and I've been doing seminars and workshops on the Dr. Bob and Ann Smith archives ever since. What an honor to be able to carry Dr. Bob and Ann Smith's message for them. Just honor after honor, miracle after miracle. 1996, I met a guy by the name of James H., and James, when I met him, was 90 years old and 61 years sober. And he explained a lot of the missing pieces to the program. He did describe, again, his sobriety date was 1934. He could have been our tri-founder. He could have actually been our co-founder. But when Bill decided to leave AA in the fall of 1937 to start what was later to become Alcoholics Anonymous, and Bill and James are going to meetings together on a regular basis, Bill said, I'm bailing out, and thank God he did, or we wouldn't be here tonight. James said, I'm going to stay and try to save it. Because both of them saw the Oxford group on this downward spiral as they were moving from a spiritual program of recovery to a political program. And James was unsuccessful, but he stayed sober the entire time, and then in the early 1980s saw AA going the same way. Instead of our spiritual program of recovery, he saw more and more psychology working its way into the program. And he came out of retirement to to try to carry the original message of recovery. And I traveled with him for 10 years, from 1996 to 2006, when he passed away at 100 years of age. But he talked about the verbal four-step, which again is basically what I did. A verbal four-step, the sponsor does the writing. We don't make amends just to clean up our side of the street. Making amends just might change the other person, like my mother, for example. And then listening to God. Not just praying to God, but listening to God and making that an integral part of the day, and making sure that I wrote my guidance in the morning and reviewed it with others during the course of the day, and then after sharing it with others, made the nightly review. And I've been doing that ever since I met James in 1996. By listening to the indwelling Spirit, I have been led on journeys around the world that have truly, truly been nothing short of miraculous. I just want to talk about two of them in particular. One of them was I had the opportunity to save my mom's life. She's going downhill fast in 2007, and I received guidance. Her doctor already called and said she probably has 2 weeks to live. And I received guidance. I put it in the front of each one of my guidance books. This one's 2013, but this goes back to 07. Your mom's not dying. She's suffering from anorexia. Sound the alarm. And I did sound the alarm. I called all the family members and said I'd received this guidance, and I called the doctor. My family called the doctor. Mom's not dying. She's suffering from anorexia. And the doctor said, well, let me look into it. She called me back a couple days later and said, your mom qualifies as an anorexic. She's lost more than 10% of her body weight in less than 6 months. And there's a medicine for people that have lost this kind of weight. It's called Megace. I'd never heard of it. I was going to put her on the marijuana munchie program, but so much for my thoughts. Megace. The doctor put her on it. Her appetite kicked in, and she gained 30 pounds, and she stayed with us for another 2 years. But going back to 2003, I'm diagnosed with terminal incurable stage 4 cancer. It's Agent Orange cancer. I've been sick with it since the year 2000. I had to stop working in 2000. Hospitalized 3 times. The third time I'm hospitalized, I've run out of medical insurance, and so I'm forced to go to the VA. I'm forced to actually throw myself at their mercy, and they took me in. And they actually did exploratory surgery. They found the cancer had metastasized. They gave me 6 months to a year to live. I got a second opinion and a third opinion, and they all said the same thing, 6 months to a year to live. Again, this was with exploratory surgery. They took everything out. They cut, they biopsied, they checked the CAT scans, the PET scans, everything else confirmed it. My oncologist at the VA said, do 3 things. 1, fill out your last will and testament. 2, clean out the garage. And 3, take your last trip. I actually didn't clean out the garage until 5 years ago. I was waiting for the other shoe to fall. I did the last will and testament, and I did my last trip. My last trip was to Detroit, Michigan. Yes, Detroit, yay! And it's audio taped. The person that audio taped me there 2 years ago has that audio tape from 2003 when I said goodbye to Alcoholics Anonymous. They're starting the chemo on Thursday. It's a 6-month protocol, and they're not saying that it would even extend my life a day, but they don't know what else to do. James H. is there, and he's not saying goodbye. At 95 years of age and 66 years sober, he said, I am going to carry on the work, Wally. His plane left the Detroit airport to Baltimore My plane sat on the tarmac for 2 hours. By the time it got to Phoenix, the Phoenix to Tucson plane had already taken off, so they put me up at the Hilton Hotel at the Phoenix airport. They don't do that anymore. But I'm being put up at the Hilton Hotel. I'm walking in the parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I heard the voice. And the voice said, "Do not let the doctors poison you. You were poisoned in Vietnam. Seek non-toxic treatment for the damage caused by Agent Orange." Wow. What does that mean? Seek non-toxic treatment for the damage caused by Agent Orange. Yes, I have taken a holistic approach to my cancer. I've been under the care of Dr. Andy Weil at the Integrative Medicine Program in Tucson, Arizona for the last 10 years. The second part, you were poisoned in Vietnam. What does that mean? Well, go down and find out if they poisoned you. So there's something called the Agent Orange Registry. I filled it out. 2 months later, they sent me a letter saying, yes, we're taking full responsibility for your cancer, and you are now a 100% disabled Vietnam War veteran. That's what pays for me to travel around the country, Canada, and around the world carrying this message. I receive no income from the sale of any literature that has my name on it. This is my gift to Alcoholics Anonymous. Not one nickel. I am subsidized by the federal government to be here tonight. Thank you, federal government. Now you know where some of your tax dollars are going. And I don't think this is too bad a bet, really. First part, do not let the doctors poison you. What does that mean? Everybody said turn down the chemo. I went down and I talked to my oncologist. I said, I believe in two-way prayer. I believe that God can speak to us. I believe that God spoke to me at 2 o'clock in the morning in the Hilton Hotel parking lot in Phoenix, Arizona. Doctor's looking up at the ceiling, writes me up. Oh my God, another Vietnam nutcase. Non-cooperative patient refuses conventional treatment for his illness and tells me we're done. There's a bed waiting for you at hospice as soon as you're ready. That bed has been waiting for 10 years now. Yes. Thank you, God. Thank you, all those angels on the ground that have guided me each step of the way. All the pioneers that I had a chance to meet and interview and just break bread with. And as I said, old friends and new. I want to just close with a very simple chorus. A man that I didn't ever meet in person, but I did have a chance to spend time with his family. His name was Johnny C. And he wrote a song just for us. It's on his last album. It's titled, I Came to Believe. And the chorus is, I came to believe in a power much higher than I. I came to believe that without him I couldn't get by. In childlike wonder, I gave in and gave him a try. And came to believe in a power much higher than I. Yes, I have come to believe, and thank you for letting me share. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome! Awesome! You guys and gals are awesome! Whoa! Thank you! Thank you!